Hey everyone, it's Michael Phair from BIT. Today's guest is Allan Mayberry, Director of Engineering at Planet DDS, a cloud-based SaaS organisation focused on the dental industry, very big in America and now taking the UK by storm. And in today's episode we discuss the challenges, considerations, the approach to scaling tech infrastructure of a SaaS organisation and kind of having that balance between demand and user growth. How do you find the balance and what is important? How do you acquire new talent and expand a team whilst ensuring the culture's there, the vision, the values are there, and that everyone is finding their why? But yeah, a really interesting episode and yeah, really insightful. Thanks so much for joining me today, Allan. How are you keeping?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. Good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
So you've spent, Allan, the last kind of 14, 15 years in software engineering and software development. You've worked for companies like Brightree, Amec, Global, and now Planet DDS as their Director of Engineering in Glasgow and kind of site lead. How did it all start from you? I see you went to university, you got a degree in software engineering, but do you want to kind of lead us on from there?
Yeah, so I went to Glasgow Cali. Kind of prior to that, I did 2 years at it was James Watt College down in Greenock. It's now University of West of Scotland. So made ND there. Left school at 16, went there for 2 years. Done my degree year at Cali. Kind of thought after the degree year, that's enough. A lot of people would stay on and do masters, honours, all that kind of stuff. Wasn't really for me. Actually, back to Dunoon, where I grew up after I'd graduated, back to my job at a supermarket. Hated that. Decided one day, had an epiphany, I'm not going to get anywhere if I stay here, I'm going to get too comfortable. So quit that, moved back to Glasgow, took a job out in Blantyre at a banking call centre. Mm-hmm. The thinking being at the time, well, I'm up in Glasgow, there's plenty more opportunity up here. So out the first 3 months of kind of initial training and found a development job back in Dunoon. So three months up in Glasgow, back to Allan, back to Dunoon. And initially took on a job for it's like a direct mail fulfillment company. Doing, it was kind of like PHP, sort of Drupal and WordPress web design type stuff, I suppose you'd call it. So took that on, interesting, ended up taking fairly significant pay hit to go back there and do that. I thought, this is going to be first step on the ladder. I was there for about 18 months or so. That took me through to about 2009-ish. And that was just obviously around the time the recession hit. Business started tightening purse strings, all that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, I was made redundant along with a bunch of other people and was kind of a bit of a loss as to what to do. I ended up taking a job working with a friend on his fishing boat over a summer, kind of somewhat randomly. Yeah. So me and another guy I know, we were doing that for, 4 months or something like that. Well, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next.
Had you been on a boat before and done fishing stuff before, or just kind of like...
Not really. It was more of a, I need something to do and I really don't want to go back to the supermarket just now. I need to, pay the bills, pay the car insurance, pay the rent.
It's definitely a pivot. That's awesome.
So yeah, quite a pivot. So, up at 5 a.m, finished at 3. It was this, I'm sure there was I can't remember if it was a World Cup or a Euros on around about that time. So I ended up, finish at 3, you could go and catch the football, making good money. But wasn't a sustainable career choice for me, and it kind of felt like I would be wasting what I'd done at uni. But then, kind of totally randomly ran into a guy that I shared a flat with while I was at uni. He had been working for cruise liners. It was like a kind of third party sort of concessions company. And was like, they're always hiring, and go and see a bit of the world. So I ended up applying, kind of not thinking much of it. Get a job working for Cunard, the cruise line. Went and lived on a cruise ship for 9 months, selling whiskey and cigars to largely to American tourists. Seen a bunch of the world, obviously absolutely nothing to do with software engineering or IT or anything like that.
No, it's good to see the background and the kind of diversity. People listening kind of know, I'm doing this now, or, how did I get to this level? It's good to hear the different places you got to. And now you're director of, software engineering, for a massive organisation. So it's good to kind of hear the different areas you touch on. And I'm thinking that Netflix show, I assume it wasn't like that. on the boat, the kind of
Oh,
millionaires.
not quite as glamorous as that. I mean, it might have been for the passengers, not quite so glamorous for the crew.
Yeah.
That was good. Like, it's seen a bunch in the world. I'd really enjoyed my time away. And weirdly, the forms filled in to go and sign up for a cadetship when I got back to Glasgow. I'd get a sponsor and everything lined up. I thought, I really enjoyed this. It's not what I thought I was going to do, but the week that I got home, so I think I got home like February, March, something like that. The week that I got home, the other IT company based in Dunoon, because there was two at the time, that worked for one, had an opening for, I think it was a VB6 sort of development stuff. And I thought, well,
Back in the day.
Exactly. Timing's kind of VB6 coming up again later in the story, incidentally. Yeah, I thought, well, throw my hat in because, again, I'm not sure what I'm going to do when I get back. Do I go back to the ship? Do I go for this cadetship? What do I do? And ended up getting a job there. And I was there for about two years or something like that. It was a company called DDL. And there was a lot of kind of direct marketing stuff, but there was a lot more kind of filtered software development, software engineering, rather than the sort of like web design type stuff that I was initially doing. So yeah, I was there for a couple of years, kind of really enjoyed it. Worked with a couple of other engineers, which was the first time I'd done that. And then kind of got a bit of, itchy feet again, because it's kind of, there wasn't an awful lot more progression I could make in there because it was just a sort of small organization. I took a phone call from a recruiter who was making one of his first ever recruitment calls, and I ended up being his first ever placement. Yep, up to this company in Aberdeen that was setting up, a company called Brightree.
Amazing.
I had a couple of friends from school that worked in Aberdeen. My sister was up there studying at the time. I thought, wow, not getting any ties. Now's the time to go and try something else. Went up for my interview. Don't know how they gave me the job. I was, miles off it. I would have thought, there's no way I would have hired me based on that interview. But they did. Joined Brightree. Learned a bunch. Mostly initially learned how much I didn't know. Really enjoyed it. Wasn't really enjoying living in Aberdeen just because it was so far away from, friends. Now,
it's hard that,
etc. You were doing the sort of 2-hour drive each way every other weekend, that kind of thing. So I actually left to join Amec on a kind of contracting basis. It was still based in Aberdeen, but it's partly, you're 22, 23, you see the day rates they're offering at the time in the oil and gas sector. And it's
how was that? Your first day rate, was it nice?
The money was great, but this is where VB6 came back, made a reappearance in my career. So I'd left the world of .NET to go back to VB6. Hated it. The money was great, but very quickly, and I thought, this isn't what I want to do, right? Yeah, you can make good money, but I'm going to stifle any progression I've got for the rest of my career if this is what I'm going to be doing. But when I had left Brightree, I'd actually said to my boss at the time, look, job's great. It's just the fact that it's based in Aberdeen. It's just long term isn't going to work for me, sort of thing. Couple of months after I'd left, got a message from my former and then future boss again saying, hey, we're opening up in Glasgow. You interested? I think I stuck at the day rate, stuck at Amec for about 5 months, and then back to Brightree, and I was there for the next 9 years or something like that.
Quite a coincidence that you said it was Aberdeen and they opened an office in Glasgow. Do you think it was a, for you kind of moment?
I mean, my ego would love to say so. No, I think it was honestly, it was probably, it was the height of, the oil and gas sector, and it was just difficult to attract talent full time. So, I think, that was probably the rationale behind it, much as, I would love to say that they want to open up an entire new office just to lure me back.
It's nice to see yourself. Yeah, totally. And you kind of risen then from the ranks, of software engineer up to director of software engineering over that kind of 8 years, and then 9 plus the previous year you had. But that's amazing. How was that for you, kind of moving from, doing your day-to-day, you're in charge of what you're working on, to then having teams of people and leadership and learning about that kind of jazz?
It's probably a running theme through my career is more right place, right time, and, too ambitious or daft to say no to things. So, yeah, if you'd asked me when I left uni, or even, when I joined Brightree, that kind of thing, oh, do you want to move into leadership? I just said, absolutely not. I couldn't think of anything worse than, taking me away from an IDE and putting me in front of, having conversations with people and talking about, the intricacies of, how to interact with people. That would have been the furthest thing from my mind as a career option or something I really wanted to do. But when we opened up the office in Glasgow, I kind of found that, because I I was one of two folk who had already been with the company and moved into Glasgow. I was interviewing and hiring people more senior than me. I was dealing with, I had to set up an office. I had no idea what I was doing with it, all that kind of stuff. And just kind of fell into it almost. And I was kind of fortunate in a way that one of the teams that I was on, the engineer manager was over in the States. Again, more of a half-a coincidence. He had some other big project in the go that he was dealing with. He said, oh, well, you know what you're doing. Can you just kind of unofficially help run the team? And was picking up bits and pieces there. And I still wasn't 100% sure if it was really what I wanted to do or not. I think it probably took 18 months or so before I really started feeling comfortable with it. But yeah, probably one of the big moments in my career. That,
sliding doors. It's really interesting you saying that, because it's apparent as so many software engineers, they kind of go to senior, principal, and it's like, oh, do you want to move into team lead or management? Do you want to stay, as a kind of technical expert of an area? And it does happen to almost all of them. You're going to get to a point where they're kind of going up these different grades. But it's obviously worked very well for you. You're obviously very good at it. Was there a lot of, imposter syndrome during the kind of first couple of years of doing it, or how was it feeling and adapting to that?
That's, to me, I know that's still a thing on, if not daily basis, at least a couple of times a week. You're like, am I doing the right thing? What the hell am I doing? How did I end up here? Kind of thing. I kind of, I got to the point where I'd sort of realized, I was competent, I'd say, at senior engineer level. I was never going to go and hit the heights of other people, because it took a lot longer for things to click for me than, other folks can read a tech spec or watch a 20-minute video on YouTube and right, I've got it. It would take me, I would read that and go, I think I understand. And then I'd go away and spend a couple hours in the evening actually digging into it, making sure I understood it. And it was just, I probably didn't have the passion that I thought I did when I started out my career to really dedicate, that extra time to get me to where I needed to be and keep up with my peers and stuff like that. So when the leadership stuff came up, although I wasn't necessarily particularly keen on it initially, what I'd found was, I actually seemed to be quite good at it. Once I kind of figured out what I was doing with it and could recognize the ability or the opportunity I'd have to kind of impact things, be just as impactful or potentially more impactful without necessarily having to be so hands-on.
I think you'd be very modest. You've obviously done, these roles for a couple of different organisations now, and big ones, and ran, big teams. So yeah, it's interesting you say about, interviewing people that are more senior than you. I can imagine that's one of those moments where you're kind of like, it's really heavy. I mean, I get imposter syndrome as well. I think a lot of people do. And interviewing someone more senior, it's kind of like, what am I doing? You shouldn't be doing this. This is even thinking you're being cheeky because you've got less experience. And it's kind of thinking, well, no, that's not my strength. My strength is this, and that's theirs.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and it was the first time I was interviewing anyone ever as well. So you're sitting interviewing people
right in the thick end.
Yeah, exactly. And a couple of questions I was putting forward was like, well, I'm not convinced I know the answer to this, so I'm going to assume that they do if they say something that sounds right. I just nod my head right. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. But again, that's anything like that. I always take that as a learning experience. And right, well, I didn't know the answer to that, so I'm going to go and try and find it and make sure I understand, so that when it comes up next time, I at least vaguely know what they're talking about.
And then you went on to, Brightree was your first experience getting to that level, operating at that kind of seniority. And then you moved on to Global.
Yeah. So I kind of got to, obviously, sort of 9 years-ish total that I was at Brightree. I really enjoyed it. It kind of got to the point where I was like, well, there's nothing wrong with this, but what else is out there? What other opportunities, what other things are going on? And yeah, the role with Global kind of came up to open up a kind of engineering hub up in Glasgow. So they're kind of primarily based in London. And it was kind of like, it was almost like take what I'd learned over the last 8-9 years of living through the growth of a new sort of satellite, if you like, team, and then go and apply that, but apply it from more leadership positions. So yeah, challenge seems super interesting. There's a broader sort of range of technologies and different skill sets and things like that I'm going to be involved. So it ticked a lot of boxes, and it seemed like an interesting challenge.
It definitely would have been one. I mean, you've kind of been part of Brightree and going through those different areas and motions and teams and kind of learning as you've been going from others, etc. And then when you come to Global, you're kind of coming as the head of. You're not going to have all the answers, but I suppose they're expecting kind of some kind of format. Was there a lot of kind of planning and preparation that kind of went into the start of it? Was it kind of learn as you went, or?
There's a lot of learn as you go sort of thing. There had been a couple of folks already hired up in Glasgow, which made it a little bit easier because I wasn't going in, completely all on my own sort of thing. But there was a lot of just getting to know the other teams, the other leaders, what projects were going on, how we were planning staffing things, etc. So the first couple of months were, a bit of sort of drinking from the fire hose. There was just a lot of information kind of hitting me from all sorts of angles. But I think once you start building those key relationships with the relevant folks around the business that you were going to be collaborating with, it kind of made things a little bit easier. But then it was particularly at the time, right? Because this would have been a couple of years ago when yourself on the market was like it was nuts trying to hire anybody.
Yeah.
Just kind of the tail end of kind of COVID, the pandemic, that kind of thing. We were fairly aggressively for the city trying to hire. We were around about 50 people or something like that. We ended up hiring in 6-7 months, something like that. So yeah, it was certainly a challenge.
That is, it sounds like a challenge, especially embedding everyone in all these different personalities and values and wants and motivations, and trying to kind of obviously, keep your culture and keep everything together. So although you've kind of got pressure to hire that amount, you obviously know yourself, you've got to ensure that it's, I think there's a saying, but I don't think I'll say it, but making sure that people are kind of coming in,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that, I think whenever you build many teams is key, right? Is scaling too quickly can be worse than or is almost always worse than scaling too slowly. In that, the first couple of people might have a great onboarding experience, but if you're not able to retain and keep that, then that's when your culture either doesn't form the way you want it to, or falls to bits, whatever sort of culture you do have, because you've just got a bunch of people sort of looking around going, I've got no idea what I'm doing, what am I meant to be doing, who's telling me what to do, what does that mean? What's our sort of business purpose, what are we chasing, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like they're kind of not glued in yet. They're like modular. They're not they're there, but they're not, as you say, like adhesive into the team yet.
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting. And then I'm going to ask some questions obviously about different parts of your career, but kind of just to get to where you are now. And you thought, I'll do it again.
I'll do it again, yeah. Why not? So it was almost, again, like I said earlier, completely right place, right time by chance. I wasn't in any way looking for a new role or anything like that, but it was through a friend, basically, that was trying to do some work with Planet. They're, well, you've scaled up a tech company in Glasgow, working, US healthcare sector. Do you want a free lunch? Go and meet some people, chat a little bit. That was kind of how it started. I met my now boss, the CTO, Angelina, and our chief customer officer were over visiting a bunch of sites. They were doing a bit of a recce around the UK to look for locations to expand the business. So met them. Really good meeting, but I didn't really think much more of it at the time than, that was cool, hope they do well. And then there was a couple of follow-up Teams calls, and I thought, well, they took the time to meet with me, so I'll chat with them. And that sort of snowballed into, do you want to come and work with us and help set this thing up? Here's what we're thinking. Yeah, a couple of months later, and here we are doing it all again.
There you go, totally. So, I mean, it's been, some career to date. When you, back at school then, like in high school and stuff, did you want to get into IT? Or were you into Star Trek, Stargate? Were you into technology, breaking things, building them? Like, what was childhood and high school like for you?
Yeah, so it probably actually started a wee bit before that. So I grew up until I was about, 8 or 9 or something like that on a farm. My dad worked at a farm. We stayed on a cottage in a farm, that kind of thing. And then my dad had a back injury that basically led to him having to retrain. So while he had a back injury, he was doing some work, like kind of the admin type stuff. And I had this, it was a pre-Windows machine, just this super old desktop machine. It's the first PC I'd ever seen we had in the house. Just get no space thing. And that kind of piqued my interest. And then in school, this was, again, back when there was a PC in the school, or maybe two if you were lucky, right? I went to a tiny primary school. There was 27 of us in the entire 7 years. So tiny school. And, weirdly, 7, 8 years old, I ended up like the IT support for the teachers. Things weren't working. I was like, need to plug the printer in for it to print, that kind of thing. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I remember because my dad actually retrained, and he's now like a systems analyst at Virgin now. It was Australia Bank. He'd kind of retrained. Awesome. He was kind of going through his college sort of studies. And one of the things that he was doing was like a web development module. So I'd have been 11 or something like that, 11 or 12. And I remember him teaching me a wee bit of HTML. And then that summer I was sat building this, personal hobby website thing at 11 or 12 years old in pure HTML, no cheating with GeoCities or anything like that, just piecing stuff together and all and figuring it out. And it kind of just snowballed from there. that was always a subject I was really interested in school. Probably between that and I really enjoyed English in school as well, but it was always sort of, IT of some sort that kind of piqued my interest.
Yeah, it's amazing that you, as soon as you get passionate in something, or you can kind of you're like, this is really interesting, what if I do this and that, and it kind of captures your attention, that's when you're best at learning. And I mean, I was never good at learning at school, or paying attention really. But then again, when you found something, that you're really interested in, like my dad, an IT technician, and I remember building, a computer, putting a motherboard in, a hard drive, a graphics card. They gave me 2 old hard drives to kind of read together, redundant array of inexpensive discs. I never forgot him telling me that. But then when that kind of passion comes in, and you're actually just enjoying it. It's not like an effort. Like for me, with maths or English.
It was the same. I remember I don't know if it's still a thing or not. Do you mind the blue paper and the yellow paper for the second-hand sort of sales ads? Sort of.
I think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I remember always looking through. I'm going to build my dream PC in my head and circling I'm going to buy that hard disk. I'm going to buy that bit of RAM and piece it together. And never ever did. And it seems like, if you explain that to my kids who's at home, it was like, what, you used to just circle things in a paper about a PC, you're never going to build it. Always where you are. But I just think in the same way that kids would be circling stuff in the Argos catalog for Christmas or that. And this makes me sound really sad, right? But I remember going through
I did that as well. My sisters as well. We had to put an M or an S for their names inside the circle, so they knew whose it was in the Argos book.
Then you get somebody else anyway.
Yeah, no, totally. Wouldn't even listen. And now you've got adult money. Have you finally built your dream PC?
Funny enough, I actually bought a gaming PC. I took a notion of it about 6 months ago, and it was sat under this desk, and I've had it turned on twice since I got it.
Really?
Just between work and we moved into a new house about 1.5 years ago, so a bunch of DIY going on, 2 young kids, other commitments and stuff. So it's there waiting for the colder winter months where I've got the excuse that the garden's not even done or anything like that. But,
hopefully you can get on soon. Yeah, totally. But it's good just to understand this as the background of kind of getting into tech. And did you find throughout your career, were mentors of a big help to you? Did you kind of know what a mentor was at the very, very beginning? Did you kind of just not know you had them, but actually were helping you and kind of moving you along at Brightree? Or
I wouldn't say I've ever had a sort of formalised mentor, and it's something that I probably regret not seeking out more, and something I'm actually kind of making moves to figure out just now to have me kick on for further on in my career. But I definitely had some people who were helping me out, whether that was kind of managers at the time or colleagues and other locations and that kind of thing. And to be honest, a lot of it was just kind of reassurance and a sounding board, more than necessarily dishing out advice and that kind of thing. But like we were talking about earlier with imposter syndrome and that kind of thing, a lot of it was, well, here's the situation, I'm not sure what to do, this is how I think I should do it. And you're just being able to bounce those ideas off people, and they maybe come back and say, well, have you thought about this? What about this kind of thing? Or no, that's exactly what I would do. And that was super, super useful in terms of, just giving the bit of confidence to follow through and, gut feel and things.
Yeah, the sounding board thing's definitely useful. I suppose people kind of going into management for the first time might kind of say, do it this way or do it that way. When actually, if you're like, what do you think you should, that's how you develop people, isn't it? What do you think you should do? What are your options? What about that? And kind of getting them to actually go through the process in their own mind. And it's like, oh, you knew the answer.
Exactly. That's how I learned something. If somebody just tells me the answer, and I'm sure other people are the same. Somebody just tells you the answer, you start using that as a crutch. You're like, oh well, I'm going to speak to that person. They're going to tell me what to do. You don't learn. You don't become independent.
Totally. Or if you respond to team messages too quickly.
Yeah.
Or if you miss them one time, they're like, oh, don't worry, I fixed it. I'm like, I know. No, totally. Anything that you do differently if you could do it again?
Probably not. I think, I think everything that I've done, I've learned from, certainly, which has put me in the position I'm in today. I mean, if I knew I was going to go and, work in the kind of day rate contract and money and be working in VB6, I probably wouldn't have done that, right? Because much as the money was an attraction, but beyond that, no. I mean, I think every step I've had so far, I've learned something from, and it's helped to kick me on to sort of the next opportunity.
Yeah.
Sort of between learning from what I've experienced, plus again sort of being right place, right time for things. It's been pretty fortunate, I think. But
it's also down to what I know you kind of say in your head, like right place, right time, and it's kind of like not taken away from your ability, but you've done really well. What about anything for final question on part one then? Is there anything you would kind of kick down or pass down in terms of advice to software engineers or people in tech?
Biggest thing for me, and something I try and push down to all my direct reports, or even just people I'm working with, is whether or not you know what it is you want to do. It's like if you think you might want to do something, go and figure out a way to dip your toe in the water. Don't necessarily overcommit. So say you're an engineer and I really want to move into leadership. Don't necessarily do what I did and just sort of overcommit. And it kind of worked out well for me, but it's probably not the best advice. It's just fling yourself in out of stubbornness and personal pride. But yeah, find ways to try it out, and don't be afraid to push back on things and say, I've spent 3 months or 6 months doing this. It's really not for me. Can we try something else? Because that's how you're going to figure out sort of the route that's going to work for you. And it may not be the route that you had planned in your head, a year, 2, 5, 10 years ago. So yeah, don't be afraid to try different things within the industry, but also don't be afraid to say no to things or to push back on things if you're not enjoying them. You spend 8-10 hours a day working. Don't be miserable doing it just because it's what you think you want to do if you're really not enjoying it.
That is a very solid advice. Yeah, it'll wear you down over time. Oh, completely. So our theme for today's Talking with Tech Leaders is scaling SaaS companies. And obviously you've done it, well, this will be your third time. Yeah. So there's obviously different challenges, considerations, but then from your experience, what are the kind of key factors to consider when scaling successfully, and then what are the pitfalls to avoid?
I think I'll probably be speaking about it more from a kind of engineering standpoint than anything else. But yeah, so some of the stuff that I've kind of experienced, and that's been both through being an individual contributor and into leadership, but the main thing to me is, I guess isn't necessarily true for scaling, but across the board, is if you can keep your team happy and engaged and with a sense of purpose, right? And that can be difficult, particularly if you're scaling quickly and the message is getting lost somewhere in translation of, we've got to build this thing. Why? Because somebody said we've got to build the thing. That's when you start to get a disconnect. So keep the team engaged with what's going on. And like I was saying earlier, keep the team happy. You need to be happy with what you're doing. You're spending 8-10 hours a day with your colleagues working on stuff. You need to find ways to make that interesting. And I'm not saying every piece of work is going to be the most engaging in the world, right? If you've got to spend a sprint working on, writing PDF reports or something like that, it's not the most exciting stuff in the world. But if you can limit that and keep things engaging, keep things sort of exciting and interesting, and we're all in this industry because we want to learn stuff constantly. So finding ways to tie that in, I think, is super important.
No, completely.
I guess focusing on customer is, it's everyone says this, right? But they say for a reason. Is if you are building something, you can relate that back to some way that's going to benefit the customer, even if it's tangentially, right? If you're building something that improves the developer experience, because that benefits the customer, because my developers are more engaged, they can operate more kind of rapidly or more independently, they can solve issues, they can get new features out. But if you're working on something, you can't tie it back to a customer, and it's because somebody said so, and there's no sense of the kind of the impact it'll have on the customer, the way it's going to benefit a customer, then you really need to question why you're doing it. There's, and I would say in every SaaS business, certainly every business I've worked with, there's no end of work. Like there's a million things that could always be getting done, right? And it's all about priorities and trying to focus on the most important thing. And if you're doing stuff that's not focusing on, benefiting the customer in some way, then you're probably doing the wrong thing, because there's something that will benefit a customer somewhere else. And then I think kind of tied to that, I suppose, is the whole stickiness, right? There's reason Amazon are so successful. There's probably places out there that you can buy stuff cheaper, but if you the Amazon app on your phone, it comes to your house next day.
I know.
It's too easy, right? And there's going to have to be a significant sort of shift away before most folks are going to, step away from Amazon and use something else. And I think it's the same with, SaaS businesses. If you can find that sort of unique selling point, or that key part where you embed yourself in the business to the point where you're integral to your customer success, and if you can make that easy and super convenient, people are more likely to stay with you, because it's much more hassle. If you're providing a great service and add value all the time, people aren't going to move away just because there's another option out there that might be a little bit cheaper, or they might have one other feature that you don't offer yet, that kind of thing.
No, completely. There's something that just kind of sprung to mind when you're talking about kind of culture. And obviously, if you're kind of scaling quickly as a SaaS company, and you've had a lot of millions put into the organisation, you kind of want to go like this. And obviously, remote working is such a big thing just now. How do you manage that? Like, how do you kind of like ensure the culture is being embedded when people are kind of working? I mean, some companies are fully remote. Like, that's hard. But if you're doing 2 days a week in the office, is it just making sure that time's, spent as a team?
I think so, yeah. I think, and I can't remember who it was. It was somebody seen on LinkedIn who made an interesting point the other day. If you're working across, even if you're full time in the office, you're working across 2 different offices. You've got teams in 2 different offices. Technically, you're remote working at that point, right? I think that's something that seems obvious when you say it, but it hadn't really clicked to me. So I think there's been a degree of, certainly the roles I've been doing remote work for past 10, 12 years. Even when we were 5 days a week in the office at Brightree, we were working with teams in, the US and Atlanta at the same sort of time. But yeah, to your point about kind of the culture piece, yeah, I think to me, anyway, the days of going into an office and, you have a team of engineers sat with headphones on, not talking to each other and just in the office coding away is a waste of everyone's time, really. If you're going to be in the office, it needs to be, quality time with a good reason to be in there. So some people, don't get me wrong, some people want to just be in an office environment, and that's totally fine and something that we support. But where we are just now with Planet, we're a couple of days a week in the office. It's kind of averaging out at, but a lot of that time is spent, either the team's working on their sprint ceremonies and all that kind of stuff, or there's some pair programming exercises, that kind of thing, or we're coming up with some in-person stuff to add value. I think there's a ton to be said for meeting people in person for the first time. So go back to when I was at Brightree. The interactions I would have with some of the folks in the States, just over Teams messages or Skype messages at the time, you never really knew. You didn't have the sense of who that person was or how they operate or how they interact. And then you go meet them in person. I was fortunate to fly over a couple of times and spend some time with the team in Atlanta. You go meet them, you go, go out for dinner or have a beer with them or something like that. And then what you thought was maybe a kind of abrupt or, fairly cold message. You're like, oh no, that's just the way he is in Teams because, we had a laugh and a joke and, we chatted about football or whatever else it might have been. And I think that's a piece that kind of gets missed quite a lot. I think you've seen it through COVID when everything was obviously on Teams or Skype or Zoom or whatever else. There was a lot of, every meeting had an agenda, and I'm a big supporter of that. It was all very formalized, and nobody felt that they could spend that couple of minutes having a bit of chit chat, talking about the weekend, talking about their family life or whatever else it might have been. And I think you lose a lot of, what makes a place great to work if you don't have that. Because then it just becomes very transactional, right? I'm writing C# code, and it's a SaaS platform, and I'm getting paid X, and that's the only thing that's keeping me here. So if the technology is not cutting edge or, I'm not learning as much as I could somewhere else, what else is keeping me here? I'm going to make 10, 15 grand a year more doing basically the same job. And, I'm not losing out on that sort of personal interaction, that personal connection with my team. So yeah, I think that to me is a big piece of why personally, I'm not a big fan of fully remote, but fully support hybrid, day or 2 a week in the office. Some weeks it might be more, some weeks it might be less, right? Some weeks you might not be in at all because that's kind of makes sense with what you're doing. But you still have those opportunities to spend quality time together where you're doing something that makes sense to do in person, right? Things like Miro are great, but it doesn't compete with, drawing stuff on a whiteboard and moving stickies around on a wall, that kind of thing. It's not quite there yet, in my opinion.
Well, I think you're totally right. I mean, you need to kind of have that glue, that adhesion, to have team members kind of working together, to have that mission, instilling the values. Otherwise, we're all just like worker bees across the UK, all separated, working for a company. It's not kind of conjoined. So,
and that may work for people as well, right? And I'm sure there's plenty of people that is they're totally fine. Like, here's the thing I'm working on. This is what I want to do. I'll get this done. I'm done. I'm already at home. I can go and do whatever I want to do. 100% support people that want to operate that way. It's not how I enjoy working, and it's not the kind of teams that I get the most sort of satisfaction working with.
Yeah. Oh, good. Cool. Talking about infrastructure then. So obviously looking at like scalability, reliability and performance, as a kind of organisation grows, how do you manage that infrastructure and accommodate these increases with user growth or with kind of customer growth?
So it's always interesting if you're coming into something that's already, an established SaaS business or something like that. From my own experience, they've already got, their own sort of bottlenecks they're hitting or the thresholds they're butting up against. Whereas if you're working on something new, you kind of get a clean slate. You can carry it away. If you're working from a completely clean slate, you can optimize to the nth degree and start going far too far down a rabbit hole of, trying to predict the future. Oh, well, we need to optimize for 100 million users. Where's your evidence? Oh, I just think that's going to be the case. Right. Well, go put a lottery ticket on then if you can see the future. We could all just go and live on a beach somewhere and chill out. So, yeah, I mean, I would always be looking to sort of optimize as much as is necessary and set your thresholds and limits based on that. If you're looking at whatever's important to you, if it's response times, if you're using like app decks or something like that. And then when you start butting up or exceeding that, you treat that as a production issue in the same way you would with any other bug. You triage it, you prioritize it, you fix it, you take your learnings from it, you see if that can be applied anywhere else, and then you just go again and again. Talking about like kind of cloud infrastructure and that kind of thing, I think it's easier to, or what I've seen in the past is it's easier to, but much more expensive to just start throwing hardware at a problem, and that will get you so far, right? You can throw money and hardware at a problem, and it'll get you to a point before it becomes sort of unsustainable. So I think there's always those levers that you can kind of pull in the short term if you need to, to keep things kind of ticking over. But again, that would be in a, we've hit our limits. This is a stopgap while we try and triage the problem at heart, and whether that is, a bug that you're fixing or you've got some sort of re-architecture piece to go through or something like that. But it's, going the other way, like I said, you can easily spend too much time trying to predict the future and building stuff that may or may not be needed. And again, like to my earlier point, it's like if you're building stuff that may or may not be needed, you're not necessarily adding value to your customers today. So why are you doing it? Yeah.
It's definitely hard, isn't it? It's like a want versus a need. And if it's brand new and you've got all this money, I can imagine it's easy to get carried away by going, yep.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is going to take us 15 months to build, and, it's never going to be profitable, but it's really cool, as a kind of proof of concept, nice piece of technology, but is, super complex, something you're proud of as an engineer, but is no use to anyone in the real world because it's too expensive to run.
Yeah. Well, completely. What about customer satisfaction then when scaling? And you mentioned earlier about, being kind of user-centric, customer-centric. Was there any strategies or kind of initiatives that you look at to ensure customer retention and kind of reduce any churn?
I think, again, coming from the engineering side of things in my own experience, try to get as much feedback from the customers and be as close to customers as possible makes all the difference, right? If you as an engineer have to go through 4 levels of management and different teams and all that kind of stuff just to look at a support ticket, or to then be, second or third hand conversation with a customer about what the problem actually is, there's so much gets lost in translation, and you waste a bunch of time, and it costs a lot of money. Those 5, 6, 7 steps in the middle between the person that can solve the problem and the person with the problem. Whether that's a customer or just the way you've got an engineering organization set up, if you can put the person who's to speak to the other person together, then you don't need all this stuff in the middle. So yeah, I think to me that's the biggest thing, right? Is you can go out and listen to your customers, find out what their real problems are, and then secondary to that, I suppose, is all your decisions should really be data based, right? I've seen in organizations in the past, both that I've worked in and places that friends and stuff have worked in, where there's kind of been a bit of a field of dreams approach where, oh, we'll build this and it's going to be great, and everyone's going to use it now. What are you basing that on? Have you done market research? Have you spoken to customers? Have you put proof of concept together? Have you figured out how people are going to interact with this thing? No, but we're just going to build it anyway, and it's going to be great. And it just seems like crazy to me. Obviously, maybe that's more coming from a sort of engineering type background where everything is sort of more logically thought out and evidence based and data driven. It's if you're not doing that with your product, if it works, you'll probably just get lucky, and lucky is not a great strategy. You're
totally right. You need to be looking at like the personas, who's using it, even different, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, all this different stuff, kind of dipping into marketing strategies there. But yeah, there's so much you actually need to know to actually make sure you're kind of going to get, something that people want to be using and continue using. And you don't get kicked out of the market in 6 months because someone else went and looked at your idea and made it better.
That's it. But equally, I think that there is nothing wrong with if you've got data and a theory and you go and experiment with it and it doesn't work. It's like, okay, cool. Well, we've learned something because the thing didn't work. So now we know that that's not the avenue to go. How are we going to go? But if you go down something and you can see it's not working, and you just keep throwing good money after bad and good time after bad time on it, that's where you're kind of, you can't be too precious about these things. You could build this groundbreaking piece of technology that solves a bunch of problems, and for 6 months it's great, and then it's made redundant by something else. If the something else is better and you can't compete with it, what's the point of, going after that versus invest your time in something else that could be the next thing that is groundbreaking and is going to be market leading.
Yeah, not completely, totally. So scaling obviously often kind of requires expanding teams most of the time, and doing it quickly, bringing new teams in. What do you find some are kind of effective strategies for attracting and onboarding new team members during that kind of rapid growth? And how do you kind of ensure that strong culture?
I think the first thing you need to do is hire for what you need. So understanding what you need and not hiring beyond what you need. So yeah, I guess by that is, say where I'm just now, right? We've just hired our first team. We had a theory of what we thought we needed to hire when we started going to market. We've ended up actually, I think, hiring 1 or 2 folk less than I planned, but that's because right now we don't feel that we need additional bodies. So knowing who the skill set you're going to need and making sure that, you're not just hiring people because, oh, well, they'd be great and we've got an extra headcount. Just because you've got the budget doesn't necessarily mean you need to spend it if it's, if it could be better spent elsewhere. So I think knowing what you need and then why you need it, right? Because that all becomes super important when you're speaking to candidates. Things have changed obviously since pre-COVID anyway, the last couple of 5-6 years. Days tend to be gone now where you get a stack of 10 CVs through and you go, right, I'll speak to these 3 people and you can be pretty confident that you're going to hire somebody out of that. There's a lot more of, I guess as a hiring manager, either organization, you've got to know your story a bit more, right? You've got to know why you're hiring these people, what they're going to be doing, their opportunity for progression. You've got to tailor it's almost like a pitch now, right? You've got to tailor your pitch to them in the same way that a candidate would be. We give all this advice to tailor your CV to the role you're applying for. It's the same thing, right? If you see something that is interesting on a candidate's CV or they mention something at interview that, oh, I'm really interested in this thing, you should be aware of the opportunities for, oh, well, we're not doing that right now, but in 6 months' time, there's this project coming up that could be interesting for you, and trying to find those little hooks that are going to attract people in. Because if you're just going for the vanilla approach, well, yeah, we write C# code and blah blah blah, here's our stack, and it matches every other organization. Who cares? So what? You're hearing the same thing from 10 different hiring managers, particularly just now, right? It's just totally candidate driven. So I think being really deliberate and knowing what the person's going to be doing, why they're going to be doing it, being able to articulate that. As I say, looking for those little hooks and picking up on things that they might mention that you can tie back to the opportunities that they could have. But don't tie back just for the sake of tying back. Right? You've got to be honest about it. And, if they mention something, you say, oh, that's cool, we might be doing something there, but there's no chance at all that you're going to work on it. Probably best not to mention it.
Yeah.
And then, I think kind of along those sort of lines is being transparent as well, right? Most, if not all, SaaS organizations are going to have some skeletons in the cupboard somewhere. There's going to be, this old application that is holding everything together, or there's going to be this monolithic thing that's pretty dated and, is the backbone of the system, but is unlikely to be upgraded. People are going to find them pretty quickly. So if you say everything is, all this bright, shiny new stuff, don't mention that. And then they come in and, oh yeah, well, you're going to work on this old stuff first. You've immediately lost any trust you had with them. So I think you've got to just be transparent. I think people appreciate that. And if you can then articulate, it's this way because X, or it's this way, but we're planning to do this in the, the next year or whatever else, we're going to uplift the tech stack or whatever else it might be. I think people then, kind of are much more willing to come along for the journey.
That's really strong advice. I mean, I think if you tell someone something's going to happen, or they're going to work on something, they will remember that 100%. But if you're speaking to people, like 10 different people on a team, and you're telling them these things, you might forget. So it's really important to, write down what you say and make sure and take note of, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, don't offer anything that you're not prepared to go and, back up, because otherwise you just look like you've been a bit of a kind of used car salesman to draw folk in and, tell them what they want to hear, and then they get through the door and the reality is completely different. A lot of people just now aren't going to hang around for that,
Yeah, especially with the market the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think in terms of like the recruitment process, it's something that I was chatting about with one of our kind of new hires actually had an interesting talk at, I think it was an event from the Code Career events that the VIT were involved with around neurodiversity.
Awesome.
And something that was like kind of a light bulb moment for me was the historically anyway, and I assume probably 90% of organizations I've heard of would interview pretty much in the same way for all candidates, right? You'll have a phone screen or something like that, and then you'll have some sort of technical interview, whether it's take-home exercise or it's technical discussion or whatever it might be. And then there might be a follow-up discussion with HR or people and culture, that kind of thing. But I guess the question is like, why is it so rigid and strict? Certainly anywhere I've been, if somebody's came to me and said, can you make accommodations for X? I say, yeah, absolutely. But why as a hiring organization, are we not going out and saying, what do you need us to do to allow you to show yourself in the best light? So some people might find, technical interviews and sort of a technical grilling for 2 hours their idea of hell, right? They get nervous, they get mind blanks, they go to the next interview, it's the same thing, and it just compounds, it gets worse and worse. So they may want, take home technical exercise where they can really prove their skills, which is probably more representative of what they're going to do, right? It's unlikely, I'm going to hire you, you're going to be coding, and I'm going to say, right, tell me exactly what you're doing, tell me everything, I'm going to sit across the table and stare at you for 2 hours. It just doesn't happen, right? So some people might give me a challenge, I can go and work in it in my own time. It's more of an investment in their time, outside of the interview process. Or it might be, I've already worked on this project for 6 months, this personal project. I've got, get repos, that kind of thing. Can I just bring that and explain it, talk you through it? And like I was saying at the start of this call, you're talking about stuff you're much more comfortable, right? So you can show yourself in your best light. And ultimately, to me, I don't necessarily want to compare candidate to candidate. I want to compare, can that candidate do the job? How do I figure out if that candidate can do the job? Do they have the skill set? Do they have the right personality? Are they going to be a good culture fit? Do they have the technical understanding? But comparing, 10 people based on the exact same criteria is probably unfair, really, because, the way that they kind of interact with the kind of the interview situation can be totally different, and it's not particularly representative of the real world environment.
It's really good you're doing that, because not a lot of neurodiverse people might not want to highlight anything because they want to kind of then be, not that they would be, but discriminated, so they might not say anything, but then giving them that option 1, option 2, option 3 process, what one would you like to go through? And they're like, oh, this one. And you might find, like you say, you get a totally different result than you standing or sitting next to them kind of saying, where's the mistake?
Yeah, exactly. It's something we've not fleshed out exactly what it's going to look like yet. The hope is to, provide at least some, or be more proactive around,
it's really good.
Tell us how we can provide a platform for you to interview in the best light possible. And nerves and stuff will definitely come into it. And, sometimes just interviews don't work for whatever reason. But if you're giving candidates the opportunity to put themselves, in the best light possible, hopefully you're going to, pick up more folks who may fall through the gaps, potentially through other interview processes. And the way the market is just now, right, you can't afford to be missing out on great talent just because, somebody got super nervous at an interview, or they're not comfortable sitting for 2 hours getting grilled by a couple of seniors, something like that. So as I say, we're still trying to figure out exactly how it might work and how we might be able to apply that consistently. But it's something that's kind of front of mind to sort of think about.
No, really good. It's awesome. Looking at then your core platform, new product, or kind of developing the current products, and then looking at innovation, how do you kind of strike a balance, and how do you kind of prioritize between them, especially I suppose when you've got different stakeholders and kind of different areas of the business wanting different things?
You always need to be looking after your existing customers first, right? There's no point going after, rephrase that, you don't want to be building a house on shaky foundations, right? If you've got a core stability problem with your platform, whether it's scaling, whether it's performance, whether it is, it's full of bugs or whatever else, there is no benefit in, you could build the greatest feature in the world, you plug it on top of that, and it's going to be crap, nobody's going to use it because it's not going to work, or your platform's down for 20% of the time, so I can't rely on you as a core piece of my business, going back to the sort of Amazon stickiness type thing. If I can't rely on your platform because it's too buggy, or there's problems with its stability, or it's always down, or whatever else it might be, I'm just not going to use it. I might find a competitor who's not quite as good, but is much more stable and reliable, and I can make do with it. So I think making sure that you're building on solid foundations, regardless of what the platform is. And if you're not doing that, you need to go and think about how do we either correct it, or do we re-platform, or whatever the solution might be. But there's no point in building as I say, the most amazing features in the world on top of something that isn't going to be able to support it. That's not necessarily always a popular answer when you get to like the product side of the business. Say, well, we can build that, but there's all this other stuff that needs to happen first of all. So there's always a bit of compromise, right? I think as long as you're transparent with the rationale behind it, I think most most businesses are going to understand, right? You can't be sustainable and grow and scale if you're going to be, not focused on any sort of core problems that need to be resolved first of all.
I mean, thinking about then big financial services companies as an example, developers may find that there's a lot maybe bureaucracy, or there's a lot of kind of different steps to get through to get something finally released. That's definitely changing, I know. And a lot of candidates or people kind of going to a SaaS company might find things are quite quick and agile, and the kind of a lot of deployments every fortnight, etc. But how important is kind of process and workflows and kind of structure and op structure at the start of a SaaS company?
I think it's definitely important to make sure you've got all the right sort of checks and balances and things in place. So if the way I kind of look at it is if somebody is able to do something wrong, it's not a fault of the individual, it's a fault of the system that surrounds it, right? If you give a junior engineer the ability to drop a table in production, well, why isn't there a check in place to stop them being able to do that, right? It's not because they went out and maliciously thought, I'm going to just, wreck our business here. It's because, well, there should be a select few people that can actually do that. There should be checks in place. You should be running through gated requests and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's super important to have process and stuff in place where I think you can automate a lot of that. It makes a difference where, if you can automate the process steps and not be reliant on people remembering they need to fill out a form or having to send a bunch of Teams messages and getting, PDF signed off or whatever it is in order to make a release. If you can automate that to your build and deployment process, you can get all of the the documentation that you need, all the evidence you need for audit purposes or whatever else it might be. You can ensure that like I said, that example, people can't just get a free run to deploy stuff to production that whether it is or isn't malicious, deliberately or not, they can't do. But you can get around the red tape that you mentioned of it can take weeks or months to get things signed off before they get deployed. And again, if you're going weeks or months before you can deploy something, that's weeks or months you're not getting feedback. So you don't know if the thing you've built has any value. It's just sitting on a shelf gathering dust. And if it's sitting there for 6 months and you're chasing it down the pipeline, it goes out and it's no use to people. You've wasted 6 months plus how long it took to build the thing.
That's such a good input into what you should and shouldn't do. I mean, did you see the thing about the lady at JP Morgan that wrote that macro for the emails? And it was like to stop everyone replying from all. I hope it wasn't just made up and it was on an Instagram reel and it wasn't real, but apparently she managed to make this reply to macro to stop the emails coming back because everyone was replying to all across the company. And then I think she accidentally got it to reply to every single email, including her own, and it crashed the system. But totally what you were saying about the not being allowed to do these kind of things, like whose fault is it?
Yeah, and I think there's always sort of ways to, you can grant sort of temporary permission for people so that you can, you may not have regular access to do X, but if you get, a sign off from somebody, you can get temporary access for 3 hours to go and triage this. So that you've got your audit trail and you can see why people are going in to do something. But yeah, I think it all comes down to, as much as, engineers and teams are, process and, I hate having to do this. It slows me down, blah, blah, blah. I get it, right? I've been there too. Usually, or hopefully, I'd like to think those things are there for a reason. If there isn't a good reason, like everything else, you should be questioning it. If you're not sure why you have to follow a process, I would always say, well, question it so at least you understand why it's there. And if it didn't give you a good answer, then maybe it doesn't need to be there. And it's, harks back to the days of, oh, well, we've always done it that way. Which is never a good answer to be.
Yeah, no, that is never is. Yeah. What about like data security and data privacy? I mean, privacy laws are extensive. GDPR, or a new data protection law that's come to the UK. I think just a copy of that with some changes. But how important is that with customer data? And I suppose it's important to get someone specialist in to understand what you guys are working on within software engineering to make sure it's all been done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's super important, right? Because that's your credibility with your customers. So, if you can't prove, and that's why a lot of places will have various, certifications, ISO certifications, all that kind of stuff. If you don't have that, then, it's more of a good faith that you're doing what you say you're going to be doing with no checks and balances. And, well, most places I'm sure would try and adhere to that. I'm sure there are some kind of less scrupulous operators out there that may not be or may take shortcuts. But yeah, I would totally agree, is get somebody in place that knows what they're doing, right? Much as it is everyone's responsibility to, and every company I'm sure has data security training and all that kind of stuff. Having an in-house expert or a third party that you can lean on is invaluable. I mean, the way to look at it is everyone pretty much in a SaaS business is in some way, shape, or form almost always under attack. So the chances of a breach are much higher if you're not adhering to best standards and best practice and that kind of thing. And given, how many attacks there are going on all over the place all the time, if you're not sort of sharp on it, you're going to fall foul at some point. And, that's the kind of reputational damage that can be, fatal in some situations, whether that is, just reputational damage or that is, regulatory damage where, data breaches, you're getting fined hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds per breach in some occasions. That can not just run your business at the ground, that can take down, the parent company. If you get parent company, that can be absolutely disastrous. So,
totally. I love it. I love the chat about people saying like, why we spend all this money on data privacy and security? Nothing ever happens to us. We never get hacked.
Aye, exactly.
Yeah, that's why I spend all that money.
Stop spending it and see what happens.
Yeah, totally.
I think that kind of thing. Get somebody that knows what they're doing. Invest in tooling. Again, like everything else in engineering, the more you can shift that piece left, right to the point of, inception, where you're talking about what am I building? Why am I building it? Why do I need to retain this bit of data? If you don't really need it and it's we might need it in the future, cool, add it in the future if you need it. Because obviously the more that you are retaining, that's more risk you're carrying. For every piece of data that you're retaining, that's additional risk that you're carrying. So if you don't need it, don't hold on to it. Let's say invest in tooling, invest in penetration testing, that kind of thing, and whether that's in-house or third party. And as I say, if you're kind of adhering to some sort of certification, whether that's ISO 27001 or that kind of thing, it can be a big process to achieve the certification, but then you can be fairly confident that you're following good practice across the board.
No, really solid advice. I mean, to kind of finish up part 2 there on scaling a SaaS company, is there any lessons learned you'd like to share with other people, or just let them figure it out? Is there any...
I figure it out. That's what I do.
Any advice to like heads of or leaders that are maybe doing it for the first time or kind of thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I think I touched on it a bit earlier, is like your team's the kind of primary driver to success, right? So if you have a good team that are engaged with what they're doing, understand the purpose behind it, and you're willing to trust them to get on with things. Like, I'm obviously, as we're scaling up, I'm kind of wearing a couple different hats, but I am almost always the least technical person in every conversation we've had within the team, and rightly so, right? Because I've not been writing much code for 4 or 5 years, something like that. But bringing in good people that know what they're doing, trusting what they're saying, and getting out of their way, letting them get on with that side of things, and how can I facilitate and support that? That's key. I would say, obviously, on the scaling piece, know why you're scaling, but also don't scale too quickly. If you say, right, we need to hire 50 people, you need to hire 50 people. Don't go and hire 40 people in the first 2 weeks, because it'll be a disaster. Because everyone's going to be staring at each other, not knowing what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and as a leader, you're going to be really struggling to serve that size of a group so quickly. So yeah, you want to move quickly, but there's a lot to be said for smaller, more nimble teams that know what they're doing can achieve a lot more than these big teams that everyone's sort of pointing at each other, going, do you know what this is meant to be? How's that going to work? What's that? Who's that person? How do I get in touch with X? How do I raise a help desk ticket, whatever else it is? So that's something that we've been super conscious with the current role. Is we want to scale quickly. You'll maybe seen the press release. It's quite ambitious sort of growth targets over the next couple of years, but we're not doing it to the point of, all right, we're going to hire this many people from day one. We're going to be, completely just constantly hiring for the next 3 years and get our first team established, get them up and running. Then we'll look at the second team. We might seed the second team with somebody from the first team. Not sure how that's going to work yet. We'll see what we're going to do. Get that team up and running. Once those 2 are established, then you go on to the third and so on. And I just think you're going to have a lot more chance of success if you surround yourself with good people that have the time to figure out what they're doing and figure out the business that they're operating in, and they're sort of key contacts and peers in the business that they can speak with.
Well, good. Really solid advice. And for anyone looking for a job around that time, you can obviously get in touch with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You plug that in there, yeah. And I love, obviously, companies that grow quick. Being an IT recruitment agency, it's always good fun. But you're totally right, yeah. Do it with a plan and don't rush the process. Part 3, kind of personal questions. So, you ready?
Go for it.
Cool. What drives you?
What drives me? I would say probably ambition, really, not necessarily directed. And I just I like to do well whatever it is I'm doing. I like to succeed, and not in the sense of I want to be paid the most, or I want to have my name up the lights, or walking about a stage or anything like that. That's not me. But I think just succeeding in building teams, or releasing a product or whatever it might be. I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the piece around bringing somebody in that's maybe early in their career, or helping somebody through more difficult time in their career, or whatever it might be. I think that's the bit I get most sort of satisfaction out of. And yeah, being able to do this, really enjoy what I do. The flexibility to be able to spend time with the family, all that kind of stuff is really important.
Yeah, no, totally. Favorite tech?
It's probably going to sound like a really boring answer, but my earbuds, because I have them almost constantly. Just from the days of USB headsets, the big sort of Microsoft Canons, I would break them every 3 months because they'd be thrown in my bag. But I've got these on for work almost all the time, or if I'm outside, in the garden, whatever else. If I'm lying inside in my kid's bed trying to get me to sleep in the middle of the night, I've got a podcast on in one ear. So as my view on good tech is something that you use all the time that you don't really realize you're using it. So something that kind of seamlessly sort of falls into your day to day. So probably not the most exciting answer you've ever had, but
it's totally right. I mean, it's like one, if you didn't have it for a day, you would notice. Where is it?
Yeah, totally. No, I'm just the same way you got the house without your phone. I'm now like that with my earbuds, because I just almost constantly have them in for something.
Yeah, cool. How do you relax after work? What's your kind of go-to?
I mean, beyond the obvious, with family, and I like to decide how relaxing it is with 2 kids under 4 sometimes. Well, big sports fan, so I'm a big football fan, big sort of motorsport fan as well. So go to events where I can, go to games where I can, or watching the TV. Music, I guess, as well. It's another big thing for me. So I've played drums since I was 12, 13, something like that, and kind of picked guitar up. Round about when COVID hit and I had a newborn, practicing drums in the house wasn't really an option. So yeah, that's a big piece for me as well. Did do a bit of gaming for a little while, but time doesn't really allow for it, so it's probably the thing that is slipped off the list the most.
It's hard, isn't it, with the time? I've got a 1-year-old. I try and escape in this room sometimes. Book recommendations, fiction or non-fiction. Have you got any you want to kind of share with us?
So in the non-fiction, there's a couple of really good ones, kind of wise, I suppose. There's one called Accelerate. I'd imagine most people have read. There's one called the DevOps Handbook that kind of almost goes hand in hand with that. There's another really interesting one called Never Split the Difference.
Chris Voss, yeah, former FBI negotiator, which I just found super, super interesting. And then on the, I guess, non-work ones, so obviously I'm a massive sort of music fan. I just finished reading Dave Grohl's autobiography, which is just, ridiculous, the life he's had and how it all panned out. So that was a really good read. But yeah, I do like kind of autobiography. Been a while since I've read any fiction. Yeah, probably back in high school type thing. And the last thing I remember finishing was like Lord of the Rings or something like that. So, I think these autobiographies are absolutely meant, aren't they? Like you kind of like, pop stars or people that have kind of been in like rock and roll and stuff, and you're like, how are you still alive?
Yeah, no, exactly. And how have you interacted with the people you have? If you go through Dave Grohl's, and he's like, before he was even in Nirvana, he was playing on stage with Iggy Pop just randomly because they were playing the same venues in one night. Things like that.
That's
it was
mad.
Just like, this is before anyone's ever heard of him or he's had any degree of success. Just crazy things like that. That you think, well, a bunch of just really cool stories.
Yeah, well, totally. Could your parents explain what you do?
My dad could, I think, just about. I think my mum would give the answer of, computers, IT.
There's so much more to it.
I know, but it's like my in-laws are the same. It's like, well, you work with computers. Can you fix our microwave? Can you fix our burger alarms going off? The thermostat's not working. Like, no.
Yeah. It's so funny, isn't it? My mate said to me once, there was a neighbour at the time, and he says, like, can you come and look at my motherboard? And I was like, I recruit IT. Also, don't ever say that again.
Yeah. I think it's And I don't know if some of that maybe relates to, I'm sure you'll be aware, obviously, people are just leaving school and not getting into IT and technology at all. And I don't know if that's the whole part of the reason behind it is like, oh, well, yeah, I don't want to just sit, soldering motherboards together, or, I don't want to be troubleshooting somebody's broadband for a life or something like that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But yeah, I've had that since school. Oh, my PC's not working. Can you bring it round? Oh, my dad's cousins wanting to set up a website. Can you do it for a case of beer or something like that?
Wait, you like say, can you set up my new iPhone? And people asking you that, I'd be like, that's Allan. He's a director of software engineering for his company, and you're going round for a cup of tea and set up a phone.
I'm Android, so I'm absolutely useless with anything Mac related or Apple related. I had there's actually at Global they use MacBooks for everything, and I spent nearly 2 years and still could not figure out how to use it.
That'd be terrible as well. I've always been like Windows. I can use an iPhone, but yeah, getting a MacBook, and it's like even clicking simple things like hitting a right click or going to close and open and stuff like that. It's just all so confusing to me. Yeah. On the school thing, Scotland IS, I had Karen Meakin on, the CEO, and she's they're going to put a digital critical friend in every high school in Scotland. That's to tell them all about software engineering and business analysts and project managers and all the different jobs they actually could do in IT. So, I mean, it'll take a while for that to obviously to kind of come through the system, but hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, definitely. So that's actually something that I think it has been a case of it just sort of got lost somewhere between moving jobs. But I'd been speaking to them about getting involved with the Critical Friends program. Again, just because I could, it would have been great if somebody came to my school and said, oh yeah, here's what you could really do, rather than just, I was kind of fortunate in a way that I had an interest in it anyway, but I think there's a lot of folk that probably could have kicked on and found something interesting to do, but they went down other routes because it's like, oh, well, I don't really want to just be, sitting in a dark room with my hood up writing code and that, that whole stereotypical.
That perception.
Yeah.
That's so important. That's good that you're doing that. You'll be a great person to have in schools doing it. Dinner party guests. Who would you have if you have anyone dead or alive?
I mean, I mentioned him already. I think somebody like Dave Worrell would be really cool, right? Just for the life he's had, the stories he could tell. And I'm a massive football fan, right? So I don't think he'd look beyond like somebody like Ali McCoist, just for the sheer entertainment value, if nothing else, and what he achieved. I don't know who you'd throw in a mix with those two right enough.
Anyone you want. Yeah, totally.
I mean, big Formula One fan, so maybe take somebody from Formula One, or maybe something like Allan McRae. I think would be cool, just for sort of what he achieved in the sport.
Oh, definitely, that'd be some table.
Pretty random table, but I think it'd be some interesting stories.
No, totally, it would be. Thank you so much, Allan, for coming on Talking with Tech Leaders. Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, been great. Thanks for having me.
Well, that was our latest episode of Talking with Tech Leaders with Allan Mayberry, Director of Engineering at Planet DDS. As always, if you're looking to scale or build a tech team, or if you're looking for a new role in technology yourself, please do get in touch with one of the guys at BIT. You can find more information at be-it.co.uk. Any feedback on the podcast is welcome, as always, via LinkedIn or my email address, michael.phair@be-it.co.uk. I hope everyone is having a great start to 2024. Thank you.